Thanks to the construction of the Suez Canal back in 1869, the route of ships traveling from Europe to Asia was reduced by almost 9,000 kilometers. Before the canal was built, a ship traveling from London to Bombay had to cross the Atlantic Ocean, go around Africa, and sail across the Indian Ocean. Now, it was enough to enter the Mediterranean Sea, pass through the canal, and be almost at the destination. But what happens if for some reason the Suez Canal is destroyed or stops functioning? Would merchant ships have to go back to the old way of doing business around Africa? If so, the consequences for international trade would be catastrophic. Imagine that a similar situation happened in the 60s of the last century.
Hello everyone, this is the Look at This channel. Today we have a very interesting story to tell you. So, please subscribe to the channel, thumbs up, and let's go.
In 1967, friction between Israel and the Arab League reached its zenith. An open conflict was already inevitable. During this unrest, on the morning of June 5, 1967, 14 cargo ships entered the Suez Canal from the Mediterranean Sea and began a 12-hour crossing to the Red Sea on the other side. The ships were already halfway across when Israeli forces began attacking Egyptian military bases around the canal from the air. After the Six-Day War in 1967, Israeli troops occupied the Sinai Peninsula, including the entire eastern bank of the Suez Canal. Egypt, which did not want the Israeli army to use the Suez Canal, immediately blocked it and banned all shipping. 14 cargo ships, known as the Yellow Fleet, were trapped and remained there until 1975. It was probably the longest traffic jam in the world, lasting for 8 years. As a result, the global situation forced all ships to bypass Africa and return to the old routes between Europe and Asia. The routes became longer and more expensive. As a result, prices around the world have risen significantly, and some countries have cancelled trade agreements between countries. The damage caused by the disruption of the Suez Canal is estimated at USD 4.5 billion per year. At the same time, the crews of 14 ships in the Great Bitter Sea were trying to cope with the difficulties they faced. Among them were 4 British ships, 2 each from West Germany, Sweden, and Poland, and 1 each from France, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and the United States. After months of waiting in neutral waters between the 2 warring armies, when it became clear that the situation would not be resolved quickly, it was decided to divide all the ships into 3 groups. The majority of the crew returned home, and each group of ships was looked after by a crew of 10. The crew's task was to maintain the normal functioning of the fleet in case there was an opportunity to escape the trap. The crews worked in shifts for 6 months. By the way, the fleet later became known as the Yellow Fleet because the sand from the neighboring desert covered it with a very dense layer. Although these were ships from countries on the other side of the Iron Curtain, the crews were bound together by close friendship. It was a real brotherhood. On the German ships, for example, church services were held every Sunday, and on the Bulgarian ships, movie screenings were held. In addition, everyone played billiards with the Swedes and visited an improvised public garden created by the French. The British set up a soccer field on the large deck and regularly organized international matches. The sailors also organized lifeboat races, and in 1968, they held the Bitter Lake Olympics in honor of the Olympics that were taking place at the time. Poles often won sports victories. By the way, if you had a lot of free time on the ship, what would you do? Please share in the comments. In 1973, 6 years after the Yellow Fleet was trapped, the conflict erupted again. This time, Egypt, which together with Syria was looking for a final solution to the Israeli problem, launched a preemptive attack. Its troops advanced through the Suez Canal, deep into the Sinai Peninsula, but were driven back when they encountered enemy defenses. The fighting around the canal lasted for about a week, with the biggest casualty being an American ship belonging to the Yellow Fleet, which sank after being hit by an Israeli missile. After numerous casualties, the parties to the conflict signed a ceasefire agreement, which later developed into full-fledged peaceful relations. The troops withdrew, but at that time, The Suez Canal was in a terrible state. It was a swamp dotted with shipwrecks and littered with mines. It took Egypt 2 years to completely remove the war wreckage and make the canal navigable again. So on June 5, 1975, the Yellow Fleet finally said goodbye to the Suez Canal. Israel regained the Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt became the first Arab country to officially recognize the Jewish state. Find more interesting and informative videos on our channel.